Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful morning here, Tuesday, March 30th. We have Ken Anderson here with us from Afixa Solutions LLC. We're going to be talking about working from home and solving the challenges of security, communication, and distraction. I think we've all had challenges and kind of had to pivot around these items, and I see his agenda and it looks fantastic. Just some housekeeping notes before we start. I am recording this session, so if anyone has missed it or wants to go back, it will be posted on our website after this. Feel free to ask questions. The chat box is in the bottom of your screen under chat. Put your name and email in as well, so Ken can follow up in case you have any questions or other needs. And then feel free to ask throughout the session. I know it says Q&A at the end, but he is welcoming any questions throughout his presentation. All right, so I'm going to pass it off to Ken, and we're all looking forward to learning about working from home and security.
All right, thank you, Victoria. I appreciate that. And good morning to everyone. I appreciate you signing in and joining us this morning. And like Victoria said, I do encourage questions. I want to make this as interactive as possible. That's one of the challenges that we're going to talk about a little bit today, is the challenge of communication between each other. It's much harder to do this type of thing interactively online than it is when you're face to face. So everyone take the opportunity right now, pull up that chat box from Zoom, type in your email address and contact information. I'm going to put my email address in the chat box right now so that everyone has access to that. And I'd encourage each of you to do the same. And then we'll be able to communicate with each other. And don't hesitate to ask questions. In addition to questions, many of us, maybe all of us, have been working from home at least partly for quite some time. And you may have some insights and some recommendations that we don't cover here. And so if you have any advice or anything like that you'd like to add, please put that in the chat as well. And so let me introduce myself. I am Ken Anderson. I work for Afixa Solutions as the Director of Managed Services. I've been involved in IT support, which is what Afixa does. Afixa is what's known as a managed service provider, which means we function as the IT support for other businesses, small and medium-sized businesses. We take over the IT management for companies that are too small to have their own IT department. And this is not going to be a sales pitch today. I want to make sure you understand that. We're available to help you. And if you want to contact us, that's great, but I'm not here to sell you anything. We just want to kind of spread the experience that we've had around. Personally, I've been involved in IT for over 30 years, I guess. Yeah, over 30 years. Sounds, maybe I'm older than I like to think I am. And I've been with Afixa for, I think this is my 13th year with Afixa. So we're going to use that work experience to talk about some things today. And the working from home has a lot of benefits, and there's some really great things about it, but there's also some challenges that come with it. And you probably all are already aware of this if you've been working from home. And so while we're an IT company and we're going to talk a lot about the IT side of these challenges and IT solutions for these challenges, there's also other challenges. There's social challenges and relationship challenges and physical challenges that we're going to discuss as well and take this on as a whole. By the numbers, these are some new statistics I just looked up and pulled out about working from home, and they're pretty interesting. I don't think even after we are through the whole COVID thing and enough people are immunized and it starts to become a thing of the past. There's still going to be a larger percentage of people working from home than have ever done so in the past, because companies and workers have realized that it can be very beneficial for both parties. 77% of those working from home report that they've been more productive. They save upwards of $5,000 a year by not having to commute. Think about all the time and gas savings and everything else. And believe it or not, people who work remotely earn $4,000 more per year on average. And 99%, that's almost everybody, of people who work remotely want to continue telecommuting in the future. So that's why I say this is something that's bound to stick around. So the better we get adjusted to it, the better we deal with it now, the better off we're going to be. One of the difficulties that I've found, now a lot of these I'm speaking from personal experience. I've been working from home for 15 years. So I'm sure that not all of these challenges affect everyone, and they may not affect you or may not affect you in the same way that they have affected me. While some of these things that I'm going to talk about are industry known and recommendations from others, a number of them are from my own personal experience of working from home over these past 15 years. And one of the issues that I've had to deal with is motivation. When you're working in the same place you're living, getting up and going to work and getting in that work mindset can be a difficult thing. If you don't have to get up and go out and see other people, it's hard to feel the need to get cleaned up and get dressed in something other than pajamas and things like that. So some of the things that I found that helped me is to set apart work and home. Even though I'm still in the same building, I set a normal work day, and I try to stick to that. One of the benefits of working from home is you can be more flexible with that than if you were going to an office. But for me, the mindset, if I'm getting up and setting a work day, then that really helps me be motivated and separate my work time from my personal time. So I set normal workday hours and stick to them. I actually go to work. I get up, I get a shower, I get dressed, I get that cup of coffee, and I go to the office. In my case, I have an office in my attic that I go to, and that's set apart. Anytime I'm in my office, I'm at work. I'm not at home, and that helps me with my motivation. Time management is really connected to that, and it's difficult in two ways to manage your time. One problem is that you can easily overwork because your computer, your office, and everything is right there at home, so you can put in a lot more hours and bleed into your personal time very easily. So this is another area where setting normal, regular workday hours really helps and prevents you from bleeding your time into personal time. You can also take a look at what your workday would be if you were commuting. Some people have long commutes, an hour commute each way, and that's 2 hours extra that they get back. If you want to be more productive, you can use those extra 2 hours and set that as part of your workday. So, and still not have any bleed through into your personal time. I also recommend taking regular breaks. This is a habit I have. I tend to get up and go to work, and I sit down, and then I just work straight through. And I have to force myself to take regular breaks, and they really are helpful. Get a cup of coffee, go for a walk, take an exercise break, leave the quote unquote office for lunch. And that will be very beneficial to your productivity. Give your brain a rest, let it recharge a little bit, and then go back to work. And you also want to avoid distractions, which helps with time management. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Distractions can be a problem in a regular office, but even more so when you're in a home office. Particularly if your kids aren't in school because they're doing school from home, you've got pets, you've got home chores, dishes, laundry, food prep, all these other things going on in that environment, and that can really wreak havoc on your workday, because now you're thinking about those things, you're trying to do those things while you're trying to work. So a recommendation there would be to create a separate work area. If possible, it would be best that this is a room, like I have a home office that's completely separate from everything else, so that when I'm in my home office, I am in a work zone and not in a home zone. And that really helps to eliminate distractions. But if you can't do that, and sometimes that's the case, at least have a separate desk or some area off to the side, or something that is designated as a work area, so that you can make it known that you are, whenever you're in that area, you're in your work zone. And that's also a mental thing. It changes your mindset about where you are. Another thing that can help, if you don't have something that's completely separate, would be to use something like noise canceling headphones to kind of get rid of that background noise, and to set up some family rules so that everybody understands that when you're in that location, you are at work, you're not at home anymore. And one of the other benefits to setting up a separate area like that is that there is a home office deduction that you can take on your taxes. And I'm not an accountant, so if you claim a home office deduction and you weren't allowed to, and you get audited, don't point to me. Make sure you check the rules before you do that. But that is a possibility that I'd recommend looking into. Does anybody have any questions yet? I don't want to just burn through this. I'd love to hear some questions and some advice. Maybe you guys have found something that works even better for avoiding distractions, and I'd love to have some new information myself. If not, I'll move on. Another thing that's really important, like I said, for me, it's really easy for me to go to work in the morning and just work right through the day and lose track of time and not realize what's going on. So exercise and movement is really important to not just your physical health, but also to your mental well-being. So being physically healthy and active can really help. And there's a number of ways you can do this. You can get up and move. You can walk around while you're using the phone, take exercise breaks, check online. There's tons of exercise routines available that you can use while you're in the office. Lots of little exercise equipment that you can use right at your desk, whether it's exercise pedals that go under your desk so you can pedal away while you're typing, dumbbells that you keep near your desk, hand grip strengtheners, exercise bands. Like this guy's got exercise bands on his chair. There's lots of things you can do, and just get a little bit of movement going, and it'll keep you more alert and active and feel a lot better throughout the day and the week. Another challenge is the amount of supervision. Supervision is really different when you are working from home than it is when you are in an office environment. And some people don't struggle with this at all. Some people are just self-motivated and go-getters, and they just do their own thing. I've got a child like this that's just she knows what she needs to do, and she just tears into it. And then I've got another child who, if he isn't pushed and nudged and directed, he won't do anything. So people are just the same way. Adults are the same way. And some of us, I'm a person that needs more direction sometimes. So reduced supervision can be difficult. To avoid that, it's really important to stay connected. Just make sure you're staying in contact with your supervisor or your boss or your team or whoever is whoever you report to, and make sure you ask them about prioritization. What tasks are important to be done? What are the goals? Where are we going? Keep everybody in the loop, maintain that communication. And personally, you can set some broad monthly goals, set some weekly goals. Each day when you go to work, take a look at your tasks and try to prioritize your tasks for the day so that you can focus on those things that are most important. Otherwise, you might lose a whole day just running from one fire to the next fire and never even tackle those important tasks. Action reports are also a great idea. If you send your supervisor or your team a report of your activities each day, that keeps them in the loop and may spur some questions and comments. And that way everybody knows what is going on and improves communication. All of which helps with collaboration. One of the real difficulties when you're not going into an office and everybody is distributed is it's very hard to collaborate with the team. You can't call a 15-minute meeting in the conference room and get together. Instead, you have to use other methods. Thankfully, if this quarantine had happened 10 years ago, it would have been much more challenging to deal with than it is today. Thankfully, we have a lot of really great tools at our disposal that we can make use of. And Zoom, like we're on today, or Teams, or any number of other collaboration softwares, even email, those type of things. So to maintain that kind of communication and collaboration, I'd recommend that you schedule meetings, particularly if you're a supervisor. Check in with your team, do weekly stand-ups. Don't make it completely about work. Camaraderie and social aspects of being a team are really important. So you want to make sure that you take some time to maintain friendships and reach out and make sure your team is doing well. But also that helps to focus back in on work. Clarifying team goals is very important. Before closing a meeting, make sure that everybody understands what the goals, the next steps, and the deliverables are so that everybody's on the same page. Stay in touch with everybody. Check in once in a while. Make sure everybody's got good mental health and the right attitude. And we as people are very social creatures. And if we're not getting that kind of contact, it's not beneficial to us. And as we talked about a little bit already, leverage the tools that are out there, the email, the Teams, the Slack, and make sure your team understands how to use those tools, share files, and do so well and securely. Any questions? All right then. Tools. We have a lot of really great tools at our disposal. We talked about some of the collaboration software already, but there's also the physical and the hardware tools that help with these things and integrate with them. Webcams like the one I'm on right now, and you probably all have webcams too, are really important. They were really hard to get for a while, and I think that's eased up now. I would recommend, when we talk about any of these tools, the webcams, the speaker phones, all of these things, one thing as an IT guy that I would recommend is staying away from off-brand and weird named gadgets. Not just, they may be cheap, they may have great reviews on Amazon, but you don't know where they're made. they haven't been vetted well, so they might be cheap because they're crummy, they might be cheap because they're unreliable, or they might be cheap because they have chips and software in them that could allow eavesdropping. You just don't know. It's very possible and very hard to detect these days, what could be contained within a gadget. So I always recommend going with reputable, well-named brands: Logitech, Microsoft, HP, if you're looking at a webcam. Headsets and speakerphones also really help. I'm on a Jabra speakerphone right now, and I hope you can hear me well. I've been told that it sounds good and works really well, and I've been happy with it. But there's also headsets that help with quality, and that makes a really big difference when you're in a team meeting, if everybody is clear and easily understood. And there's Jabra and Motorola, Logitech, Plantronics, a number of very good brands that help with that. Another thing that I would recommend to anyone are multiple monitors. I've been using multiple monitors for years, and I don't know how anybody can do without that. And that can really help, particularly if you're on video calls and things. You can put the video on one screen and you work on another screen. And when you're talking about tools, you come to rely on these tools, and sometimes they fail. So if you're scheduling meetings and require tools, consider having a backup for your tools. If a webcam or a speakerphone or something is really important, consider having a backup on hand for that. And also be prepared for internet outages. Give everybody a dial-in number for a meeting in case the internet goes out, that type of thing, so that you're prepared ahead of time. Yes, so in addition, we talked about some of those social challenges, and now that we are starting to ease up with some of the restrictions, this probably isn't as much of a concern as it was for some period of time. But isolation was a big problem, and it could be in the future. So I'll discuss it here briefly. Some people are good when they're isolated. Some people don't need a lot of contact, but then there's the those that consider themselves a people person really struggle with isolation. So you want to avoid that as much as possible, and you want to leverage your tools to avoid that. There's, schedule video calls, do outdoor activities, walks, hikes, picnics, that kind of thing, and games, board games, watch parties, virtual book clubs. There's all kind of things that you can even do online. My family and I, we're spread out all across the country, so we play board games and stuff online to keep in touch, and that way we could talk and communicate and laugh with each other while we do stupid stuff on board games. So there are ways to avoid being completely isolated, even if you can't be physically together. Now we're going to start talking a little bit more about some of the technology. And one of the things that is really important is your connection to the internet. Almost all of the things that we talked about as far as tools and technology related require an internet connection. And if your video is glitchy and your audio is bad quality and you can't get to your files and you're not able to collaborate well with people, that's a big problem. So looking at internet bandwidth is really important. There's things you can do. You can increase your bandwidth with your internet provider and get better service. Check your bandwidth, make sure you're getting the bandwidth that you're supposed to have, because you might be getting cheated and not know. So do an internet speed test and find out. Or it may be that your bottleneck isn't your bandwidth through your internet provider, but through your router. So you can improve that by replacing the router. Routers, particularly Wi-Fi routers, are shared connections. So the more devices you have connected to a router, the less of that speed you're going to get to each device. You only have one set of, if you've got a router that gives you a 50 meg connection, it's going to drop down with each device that's connected to it. And with everybody moving home, kids being at home, parents being at home, working from home, Amazon devices, internet streaming, all of these things on Wi-Fi, everybody's getting a smaller and smaller slice of that pie. So there's ways around that. You can get a better router that has more bandwidth and allows for more connections. You can get a set of routers like these three in the lower right-hand corner. That's a set of mesh routers that provide the ability to connect more devices, and they talk to each other. So it divides up your internet connection better. Make sure your router's in a good position. If it's tucked in a corner or in a cabinet or something, it's not going to provide good connections. And again, you want to look for good brand routers. I wouldn't buy some cheap, weird, odd named router. I'd recommend Netgear, Asus, Linksys, TP-Link, Eero, TP-Link, and Netgear all have mesh routers. And if you're buying a new router, look for something that supports Wi-Fi 6. And you can also use Wi-Fi extenders, which work, but may be a little iffy sometimes. And put some policies in place in your family and make sure that if you're having bandwidth issues, that somebody's not streaming 4 high-def video streams while you're trying to do a team meeting on Zoom. Moving home provides issues that have to be dealt with as far as security goes. The transition from a corporate environment where the building that the company is housed in, it has strictly managed internet security with corporate routers and firewalls and antivirus policies and strictly managed PCs, to an environment where all the employees are now at home. Many of them may be using their personal PCs, has been a challenging one, and it really increases the attack surface of for a company, for hackers and malicious parties to attack. And so home offices aren't protected and hardened like corporate offices have been. So these are all things that we need to deal with. Along with that, there's been increased network traffic because now everybody's spread out. So there's even more email, there's even more file sharing, even more reliance on cloud services than there have been before. It's also harder to get quality IT support because companies aren't able to send an IT person to 85 different locations as easily as they could support a single building. Along with this comes the increased likelihood of a phishing attack because now everybody's spread out. They don't have the personal contact that they would have had before. So it makes it easier for somebody to impersonate somebody else and send fake emails that can be used. There's also more sharing of computers for work and personal use, which opens up issues with kids installing games, or now you're doing your shopping on the same computer that you're working with, and all of these things are additional challenges. And we'll talk about that a little bit more One of the things that we can do to resolve some of these security issues is to put in a good router. And this isn't just good for bandwidth's sake to make sure we have a good quality connection, but we want to make sure that a router that's put in place has good firewall and security software built into it. Routers also need to be updated, just like your PC installs Windows updates. Router manufacturers release updates for those devices. So it's good to know how to log into your router, access the update that software. It's really, really important. As vulnerabilities are exposed, these routers are updated to prevent people from breaking into them. Super important is to make sure that the router's default password is changed. Otherwise, it can easily be broken into. And if you've got your Wi-Fi set up, make sure your Wi-Fi password is secure. Don't make your Wi-Fi password something like dog or cat. Make it something that's difficult to guess and would be difficult to brute force and attack. Another thing that I would recommend for doing company things or even personal finance or anything critical like that is to implement a VPN, particularly if you're using a Wi-Fi network. And what a VPN provides a secure encrypted tunnel from your connection to what you're accessing. So even though you're on a Wi-Fi network that might be broadcast in the open air, all of the information that you're communicating across that connection is encrypted. So even if somebody is able to eavesdrop, which is certainly possible over a Wi-Fi network, if they would like to, they won't be able to read that information without the encryption key. So it's another level of protection. Some companies even require a VPN to access their network, and that's really good. But you can implement your own VPN, and there's a number of, I wouldn't go with any of the free ones that you see because I don't believe that they're trustworthy, but there are a number of fairly low cost, good VPNs out there that are available for personal use. NordVPN is one, private internet access would be another one, Surfshark. These are all quality, low cost VPN services that you can turn on to encrypt all of your internet communication. Any questions? All righty. Let's talk about email. Email is a really great communication tool, but it's being more and more exposed and leveraged for attacks. There's phishing. We all get these messages that are made to look like they're from the bank or from UPS or from Amazon, and they're fake. And the whole idea there is to get you to click on a link or go somewhere and enter personal information so that the scammer can take that information and use it against you. There's also spear phishing, which is more personally directed. You may get something that looks like it's an internal email from within your company, from the boss or to the boss. And in that case, they've garnered personal information from some other source, whether it's social media or social engineering or something, to specifically target you. And those can be harder to detect because they contain personal information and they look like they might be real. So you've got to be really careful. Financial scams, everybody knows about the Nigerian prince that wants to send you millions of dollars, but there's a number of others out there that and they're constantly evolving, and they're not so easy to detect all the time. Tech support scams, people call saying that they're from Microsoft, or they email saying your computer needs an update. All of these things are becoming more and more prevalent, and you've got to keep a watchful eye out. Malware and ransomware are designed to infect your computer and either encrypt your files and hold them for ransom, or to put some software on your computer and use your computer for purposes other than it was intended. Some of them might use your computer power to mine for Bitcoin, or they might use your computer to funnel other emails through it. So what do you do about all of these email issues? They keep coming out more and more. We see them in the news, and as an IT company, we deal with them all the time. So how do you avoid that? The number one thing to do is to stay informed. Check out some tech news, just the headlines even. Make sure you understand what a scam email looks like, or a phishing email looks like, and be able to recognize those. Be vigilant. Don't click is my number one rule that I tell everybody. If you get a link in an email, just don't click on it. It might be perfectly legitimate, but don't click on it anyway. If it looks like it's from Amazon and they want you to check on the status of an order, don't click on the link in an email. Open your web browser, go to Amazon, log into your account manually, check on it there. That way you don't have to worry about whether it's a fake link or not. Be wary and vigilant. Just be paranoid, I guess, you might say. Suspect that every email is fake, and then the fake ones will seem to be more obvious. Another thing to do is to keep your computer up to date. Don't put off those Windows updates. I know they can be a pain, and maybe don't install all of them the instant they come out, but don't keep putting them off for months either, because most of them are security related, and they are there to patch vulnerabilities that have been identified. And same with antivirus. Make sure you're using a good, reputable antivirus, whether it's a Bitdefender or a Symantec or AVG or something, and make sure that that's kept up to date. That's really important. Don't think it'll protect you from absolutely everything, but it's a good part of the protection. Aside from email, just your software has vulnerabilities in it. You can be vulnerable to viruses and ransomware. We've talked about that already. The software itself, software has become so complex in the way that it's designed and the things that it's designed to do, and it's designed to interact with other softwares. So there's going to be vulnerabilities that are identified in that software, whether it's through poor programming or just connection-oriented items within that software that seemed like a good idea at the time. And then there's the people that want to hack in and use your computer for things you don't want it to be used for. So to avoid these things, there's some real basic things that we can do. Number one, again, keep your computer up to date. Not just Windows either. Windows is really important, but your BIOS and your firmware should be kept up to date. And that's a little more complicated. And if you would like more information on how to update your BIOS, please feel free to reach out and contact me. There are vulnerabilities in CPUs and chipsets that have been released recently that need BIOS updates to fix. You can't fix them with software and antivirus. So that's something that really ought to be done. Antivirus needs to be up to date. Again, there's a bunch of good brands out there: Symantec, Bitdefender, Kaspersky, ESET, Sophos. But make sure you have something installed. Windows 10 does have a built-in Windows Defender that's not a terrible antivirus, but make sure that that's running and it's up to date if that's what you're using. Keep your software up to date. Zoom, which we are using right now, for example, when it became super popular after people were quarantined, lots of issues were exposed with it. and they've had to release multiple updates to it to secure those. So make sure your softwares are up to date. Zoom, Adobe, QuickBooks, Java, your web browsers, all of these things release updates regularly. And the other thing I'd recommend is be careful when you're browsing. Be careful about the links you click on, the places you go, and don't expose yourself unnecessarily to problems. Password management is very, very important. So there are some things that I would recommend you avoid. Weak passwords would be one of those things. Don't use just something simple. Make sure you're using complex passwords that are hard to guess and hard to crack. Upper and lowercase, numbers, symbols, 8 characters or more at least. And password sharing, this is the really big one, and this is the really hard one to avoid. When I say password sharing, I don't mean don't share passwords with your friends and things. You shouldn't do that either. But what I'm talking about here is don't use the same password on multiple sites. The problem with using the same password on multiple sites is that if one website has its user database hacked, which happens regularly, that means that if one user website database is cracked, now they have access to that website with your password and every other website that you've shared that password with. So that's a really dangerous thing. So recommendations here would be to use strong passwords or phrases. It can be hard to remember odd passwords with characters and all those kinds of things in there. So you can use a password phrase with multiple words in it, and that is much harder to crack. Sally sells seashells down by the seashore could be a password, for instance. Even though it's super long, it's easy to remember. Make sure you're using a different password for every single account that you have, which is really hard to do unless you're writing those passwords down. I couldn't possibly remember the password for the 200 different accounts that I have. So that ties into the next recommendation, which is use a password manager. Password managers let you use completely random odd passwords that are different for every single web account. It manages all those passwords in an encrypted database that not even the password manager company has access to, so that if they are hacked, nobody still has access to your passwords. It's all encrypted with a master password. So that's the one password you really have to remember, is the password manager's master password. And there's a number of those. There's LastPass, Dashlane, Keeper. A number of them have free options and paid options depending on what you need. Another thing I would really recommend is implementing multi-factor authentication anywhere you can. And that's where you're required to have not just a password, but a code from somewhere afterwards. There are authentication apps you can install on your phone that generate those codes that tie in, or it's less secure, but you can have a code texted to you that you enter. And the last recommendation I have for passwords would be to sign up at haveibeenpwned.com. And that is a website that tracks all of the vulnerabilities that have been opened. If a site has been hacked, they'll list it there, and they have access to all of the accounts that have been breached. So you can sign up there and get a notification if somebody steals your username and password from somewhere like Adobe. I've had a couple notifications. My Adobe username and password was taken, and you'll know right away, so you can go change it there. And hopefully you haven't shared that password on any other accounts, and then you're only affected there and you can change it really quickly. Now, questions? All right, well, we're almost through here. The last thing that, being an IT firm, this is something we recommend to everybody, is to make sure that you have things backed up. And when you move from an office to home, this can be a problem. In a corporate environment, the company manages all those backups, but when everybody moved home, you might find that that's not the case. Data may not be backed up, applications configurations aren't backed up, and you might have hardware that you're counting on that you don't have a replacement available for. So our recommendations there, implement a backup, preferably something that copies the data off site, so that if you have, God forbid, some catastrophe like a fire or something else, you don't lose your backups as well. And there's a number of services that do cloud backups, Carbonite and other things. We also recommend using image-based backups, where it takes a snapshot of the whole system rather than just backing up the hardware. And we talked about this a little bit before. Think about what your critical devices are, where are your single points of failure. If you absolutely rely on your computer for work, do you have an old computer standing by that you can switch to if you absolutely have to? What happens if your router gets fried? Are you going to be without a router for a week, or do you have an old one on standby there? Computers, routers, webcams, any of those devices that you are critical to your job, consider having some form of backup for those. And that that covers everything I wanted to cover today. Didn't have any questions from anybody, so either nobody was interested or I did a really great job. But I'd be happy to take questions from anyone. Silence.
I thought that was a lot of great information, that a lot of the stuff I didn't know about.
Good.
I'm guilty of using the same password on multiple things.
It's too hard not to, unless you're using a password manager.
I can't, I need to either write them down because I can't keep track of them if I don't use the same.
Who can? I mean, the
I
brain's
know.
not capable of it. So that's why we recommend a password manager. It's really the only way to avoid it. And most of them work not just on the computer, but on your phone as well. So you can install the app on your phone, and then you have access to those passwords wherever you need to log into stuff.
This was great. And on behalf of the Scranton Chamber, we just want to thank you, Ken, you know, for being on today and providing all this great information. And if I could, I would love to have these slides as well, so we can attach it with the presentation in case anybody.
Oh, I'd be happy to send that out. Sure.
Thank you so much. Any
All
last
right.
questions? We have a couple minutes. I guess we'll take that as a no. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great week, and we will see you at the next seminar. Thanks all so
All right.
much.
Thank you, Victoria. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.